Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Moore. Tom, how's it going?
Oh, Tony, we are about to embark on the next segment of the off-season. We're about to go cover some camps at Ohio State in just a couple days. We're getting the show out a little early this week because we're going to have a couple busy days out at the Woody later in the week. So, we're not to the season yet, and we're not to the camp before the season. We're not to the talking season before the camp before the season, but we're to the camp season before the talking, before the fall camp, before the season, which feels like real tangible progress. I think we're more than halfway through the college football offseason. So it's basically here.
Yeah, basically here indeed, Tom. We are 50 days away from Big Ten Media Days, which is the official start of the start of the college football season. Right now, we're in the middle of the end of the start of the off season. Pretty much done with it by now. We are in college football magazine season, I think is where the official, and then, yeah, we're going to be on campus 6 or 8 times this month for camps, 2 this week, and then like every other day for the next couple of weeks, essentially. So plenty of stuff there. And this was the first big official visit weekend for the Buckeyes, and there are 3 guys that I wanted to touch on for this show, and that's receiver Dakorien Moore, running back Bo Jackson, and edge rusher Justin Hill. And I want to start with Moore because he's the number 1 receiver in the nation, 5-star guy out of Texas, was previously committed to LSU, decommitted to LSU, has had Ohio State, in his top 5 or whatever, and was on campus this weekend. And Mark Givler from Buckeye Huddle spoke with Dakorien's mom and said Ohio State's going to be really hard to beat, and everything's going to be compared to Ohio State. The kind of things that you want to hear coming out of an official visit, but also the kinds of things you hear coming out of an official visit. And so next week, and I believe he is at LSU next weekend, then the weekend after that at Texas, and then the weekend after that, Oregon. And so those are his official visits, the 4 that he's going to get scheduled for now, apparently. But it seems like this is coming down to Texas and Ohio State, and it seems like maybe Ohio State has pulled even. But Tom, if Ohio State has pulled even to Texas before the Texas official visit, have they really pulled even?
Yeah, they've pulled even for a not particularly meaningful 7-day stretch in early June, with early signing day still 6+ months away. So sure. And this is one where, Ohio State fans have been on the other side of these dramatic recruitments where even if a guy commits, it's drama down to the time pen meets paper in mid to late December. We'll see how this one shakes out. I think, Ohio State certainly, I think, has the track record to point to that, A, you're going to get on the field, B, you're going to play, C, you're going to get developed, D, you're going to make a bunch of money in the NFL. And there's a pretty clear pipeline there that they can sell. And Brian Hartline is a pretty likable and pretty personable guy and has a track record of developing a lot of talented receivers into, really, really elite NFL players. So they have a lot to sell there. You've got the on-field success, you've got the NIL, you've got all the pieces that you could possibly want at any program. I wonder right now, Tony, how much the previous 2 recruiting classes are playing into the fact that they don't have necessarily the kind of commitments. Normally they've got a couple guys already in the class at wide receiver. Every class is different. Every player is different. College football is changing every year. But when you look at having J.J. Smith and Mylan Graham a year ahead of you, and you look at having Carnell Tate and Brandon Innes and Bryson Rogers a couple of years ahead of you, there are probably places in the country where you may have an easier time getting on the field early. And with NIL being, at least somewhat linked to your on-field performance, maybe that's something other schools are able to sell. Hey, you're just going to sit for a year and a half there. You're going to sit for 2 years there. Why don't you come here and play where you can play right away? Now, sometimes when you're playing somewhere, you can go to Eastern Michigan and play right away. Sure. How much of a sales point, sales pitch is that? finding that balance for programs, you're going to play right away, but also you're going to play with really talented players. You're going to play for a team that has a chance to compete for the national championship. There are not many places that can actually sell that. There's probably not a coincidence, I don't think, that the list of schools that you listed all are probably able to sell that. And that's probably the sales pitch that's being used against Ohio State right now. So, I've said this before, but if I'm an Ohio State fan, wide receiver is one of those places where I just don't really worry about it. If I'm an Ohio State fan, Brian Hartline is going to get plenty of talented wide receivers. They have functionally gotten nothing out of the 2022 class so far, and the wide receiver room is a little thin, but extremely talented and not really a concern at all. I would point to the 2022 class, Tony, just to look at, because I think that was a class where they didn't get the 5-star elite wide receiver. That was a class that had Jackson Smith and Jigba 2 years before it. It had Marvin Harrison and Emeka Ibuka 1 year before it. I wonder if that might be a little bit of a pattern forming where you've got a couple really, really talented classes ahead of you, and it's hard, schools can maybe use that against you in a way. And then now, they've had a couple of years where the 2022 class really didn't pan out. So you've got a couple of years where you've been able to capitalize on that. And you also got to remember, Tony, they have the number 1 wide receiver for 2026, Chris Henry Jr., already committed. So that probably factors in potentially there as well.
Well, even you're looking at the 2022 class, they're looking at Jaden Ballard as well as a top 50 player that would factor in there also. But I also think that maybe the evaluation of the players was a little off, because you're talking about Keon Grays, Caleb Burton, Caleb Brown, all top 100 players. So whether that's everybody's evaluation is off, but all 3 of those guys, and Caleb Burton at one time was a 5-star, but continued to drop and has not really been able to do anything since leaving Ohio State, and has been one of those that just never continued to develop. Peaked in high school and peaked as maybe like a sophomore or a junior. And, you look at Kojo Antwi as the last guy from 2022 around, and he was a number 115 player. So, like, if they can get 4 guys of that rankings, you would expect that, that's a pretty good class, but you would also expect them to produce more than this class did. It would be hard not to produce more than this class, but you just, with Keon Grays off to Cal, Caleb Burton gone a couple of years ago, Caleb Brown off to Iowa, to strike out like that when it didn't really appear that maybe Caleb Brown could have done something if he had stuck around longer. Keon Grays couldn't get on the field. Caleb Burton, that whatever happened there happened, and Kojo Antwi is still working to get on the field. And looks like he's kind of been passed by some younger guys, but obviously willing to work to get back into that fold. And the 2025 situation it looked like it was going to be really, really good. I mean, there was a time when it looked like Jamie French was in, and he's still out there looking at schools and probably not going to be a Buckeye. And they've got 1 commit in Dazee Jones, and still waiting to land others for a while, like way back when Winston Watkins was a guy that was a possibility. You've got other names that were out there floating around, and they had Dalen McCutcheon on campus for an official visit. He's the number 216 player. Dazee Jones is the number 225 player right now. They've looked at Phillip Bell out of California as the number 233 player. Javon Boggs at this point was committed to Ohio State. And when we talk about looking at previous classes and determining whether or not you want to go, is it too crowded? Javon Boggs is the guy that said, go where you're needed, not wanted. That's why he decommitted. So he's going to go find somewhere where he's needed, not wanted, as if like Ohio State is just collecting these guys and figuring it out later. Whereas, as you said, go somewhere where you can play sooner. It looks like that's what he's going to do. But eventually you've got to start landing some guys, and it's June. Is it early? Is it late? No. I mean, the clock is always ticking, and it ticks faster and faster the longer you wait to land guys.
Well, and I don't know if did you mention Vernell Brown while you were talking there? I
No,
don't
no.
know if yeah, I didn't hear his name. He's another one. He is pretty highly touted. He's one who I think was on the more likely to end up in the class side
Mhm.
of the spectrum there. This is, I want to be real clear. Like, in addition to saying I don't think Ohio State fans need to worry about wide receiver recruiting, I don't think Ohio State fans need to worry about wide receiver recruiting in 2025. They're going to end up with they're going to end up with 3 or 4 perfectly good, very good receivers for this class. This is not something you need to worry about. Yeah, they typically have more than one guy in at this point in the cycle. I just don't know how much of that to chalk up to this is just kind of guys are stringing the process out a little bit more. The closer you get to National Signing Day, the more leverage you have. We've seen guys commit early and then sort of open things back up late, and then hey, you have more leverage in terms of NIL. When you can sign anytime, you have lots of leverage when it comes to NIL. So you've seen that happen at different spots across the nation over the last few years. I don't think, I certainly don't think this is a spot that's a concern. I certainly don't think it's a spot where it's like, oh boy, this is going to be a class full of misses for Ohio State. I think it's fine. I don't think there's any real reason for anyone to be worried about it. It's just, I think there's a bunch of different factors at play. Why do they not just have, the top 3 wide receivers in the nation all in the class already? I think there's a couple of factors there. We talked about them in terms of the path to the playing field and, going where you're needed instead of wanted and, all that kind of stuff. I think there's a bunch of stuff that goes into it. I don't think it's anything that anyone, Ohio State fans need to freak out about. Because again, you just got 2 5-stars in 2024, including one who feels like he is on a meteoric path already towards playing time and more. Another one in Mylan Graham who hasn't even stepped foot on, really has not stepped foot on campus yet for all intents and purposes, and who I think we have reasonably big expectations for. We talked about him on a whole show basically last week. And then you've got Chris Henry for 2026. So, I don't think you're in any kind of, any kind of trouble there at the wide receiver position anytime soon.
No, and Brian Hartline has shown that you can strike out on a class and it almost go unnoticed unless you're really looking. I wonder if delays, and to call things delays at this point is, I mean, again, June official visits are just starting, so let the kids visit before they start committing. But a while back, Gene Smith testified that some recruits are asking for like $5,000 a visit. And now with unlimited official visits, I'm wondering, like, do things go? They're going to take a lot of people. More people are going to take all of their visits, especially if they can, get paid to do it as well. And not that that's the case here, but just the encouragement, the incentive to take your visits is growing and not shrinking. Especially since schools will wait for you, especially if you are good enough.
Well, and if you want to look at why does Ohio State not have any of the top 25 wide receivers committed right now? Well, Tony, you want to guess how many of the top 25 wide receivers in the 247 rankings are committed right now?
Is it like 3 or 4 or 5?
It is 4, yes. The number 5 receiver, Jerome Miles, out of Utah, is committed to Ole Miss. There's a cultural move for you from Utah to Oxford, Mississippi. Dallas Wilson from Tampa, Florida, is committed to Oregon. Quentin Simmons out of Cincinnati is committed to Kentucky, and Teron Francis from New Orleans is committed to LSU. That's it. 4 of the top 25. So, this is one of those things where I think you got to put it in a little bit of a broader context. That there's not, there's not any reason to be concerned about this. It's not like Georgia is stacking an incredible wide receiver class right now. They're not. Nobody is. The wide receivers have really not committed yet. I think you may be seeing, at least under the current iteration of NIL, which of course is all going to change again in a year, but under the current iteration of NIL, you may see some of these commitments get pushed a little bit closer to early signing day. And then, as we've seen over the years, how much are these commitments worth? Sometimes a lot, sometimes not a lot. And it just it all depends. But, looking at the national landscape, I don't think there's any reason for Ohio State fans to be overly concerned right now.
Well, and anymore, signing is the new committing, because that doesn't really mean as much as it used to either. So Yes, signing a letter of intent is legally binding until you decide to leave, basically. Like, I have decommitted from this letter of intent, but you can't. No, I can, and I can do it over and over again as I want. So that's Dakorien Moore. Bo Jackson, running back out of Cleveland, who is, I think, a top 5 running back according to 24/7. We've seen him a bunch on campus, and I saw him in Obet's last spring as well at a camp, and is always impressive. Being an Ohio guy that Ohio State really wants and is pushing for, you think, okay, well, he'll be a Buckeye. And over the last couple of weeks, it looked like there are a bunch of rumors about, a bunch of smoke about Georgia being the guy, and I believe he was at Georgia last weekend. And, rumors that he's Georgia bound and Ohio State's going to strike out on him. And new running backs coach Carlos Locklyn has missed the boat on the Ohio kid. Has his official visit to Ohio State. Things went really, really, really well. Looks like, Tom, maybe the Buckeyes are back in the driver's seat. Some will tell you they've always been there. But if they can, they don't have any running backs in this class yet. A year ago when we were at June camps, we're like, how are they only going to take 3 running backs? And they're only talking about taking 1 or 2. And it's like, they've got all of these running backs that want to come to Ohio State. How are you going to tell them all no? That whether you're talking about Torrey Blaylock, Jordan Davison, Marquise Davis, Bo Jackson, and then Carlos Locklyn gets here and he's offering even more guys. And it's like, don't forget about the guy in Ohio, because you've already lost one in Marquise Davis. You can't lose the other in Bo Jackson out of Cleveland. And so if they can get him locked up in terms of the commitment, and you get that Ohio kid, you get one of the Ohio kids here, and then you can continue to branch out and fight for all of these other regional or national guys. But you got to secure Bo Jackson.
Yeah, I think at many positions around the field, it starts in Ohio. Ohio is the foundation of most Ohio State recruiting classes. It's not where they're taking 18 Ohio kids like they did at times during the Jim Tressel era, but there are certain spots, especially in the field. Offensive line comes to mind, running back. There are certain spots where you're going to get Ohio kids in just about every class. Linebacker, they pull out a lot of Ohio kids at linebacker. Running back, Bo Jackson seems like he would be a great fit for this team. We've seen him a bunch at 7-on-7s. We've seen him a bunch at camps. He feels like he checks all the boxes for what you need out of an Ohio State running back. He's 6 foot tall, 205, so he's got decent size already to be potentially an every down back if he, especially once you had a year or 2 in the strength program. And when you have an in-state guy like that, who is presumably still top of the board. We don't know exactly with Carlos Locklyn, how things may have shuffled a little bit, but that seems like that would be a really, really solid foundation for that class. It sounds like they have seemingly gotten themselves back at the top of the list if that ever had really, truly changed. But yeah, he feels like if you're going to have a really good class, building it with an in-state guy, that seems like a great place to start that class. And then they just had Anthony Rogers, who's an Alabama commit, on campus for a visit over the weekend. Sounded like that went well. It's a Montgomery, Alabama kid who's committed to Alabama, or how likely it is you're going to pull him, we'll see. But they still have Jordan Davison, who they seem like they're in decent shape with out of Mater Dei in California. I mean, there's a bunch of running backs that they don't need to get all of them. They need to get 2. If they get 2 good running backs in this class, that's a really good class. And they still have, you don't need to go 2 for 2. You need to go 2 for 4, 2 for 5, something like that, of the guys who they're still serious contenders for. And that seems somewhere between plausible and likely that they're going to do that. So this is not, with Carlos Locklyn, he does not have the Brian Hartline track record of success where you just kind of hand wave it and go, it'll be fine. But it seems like they're still in good enough shape with enough different guys and with a depth chart that seems pretty promising, pretty friendly right now, where you're going to probably be losing Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins after the season. So you would certainly think that you would have, a path to the playing field relatively early, potentially, for guys to sell. So that feels like a spot where they're probably also going to end up being okay. I'm less confident in specific names there, but it feels like if it's going to be a good class, Bo Jackson is probably going to be one of the two guys that they get there.
I think one thing that Carlos Locklyn is used to doing is turning over every rock, being at the places that he's been. And you can't just recruit off the top of the recruiting boards. Basically, you're gonna have to go and look and really evaluate players and look at skill sets and how they fit, and why are other schools looking at this guy, and kind of just you like somebody, and it's like, why does nobody else like this? You have to have the confidence that you're right, and that's something that all coaches need, all scouts need. You have to have the confidence that you are correct. Sure, you're going to want to judge your work, but you also have to stand by your beliefs. And right now it's the whole theory versus testimony, because he's not been doing it long enough, but obviously he's a very confident guy in his abilities. And it'll be interesting to see how this works out, whether, you secure somebody this summer, and then if you get a big name, do all of the other big names kind of pass you by? And then you're looking at seniors. Basically, what do you do as a senior, and going from there and seeing if you can find somebody, the unpolished gem, if you will, or the guy who was a backup last year and then finally gets his chance, backup behind an All-American, finally gets his chance, and he's really good as well. So it's going to be interesting to watch. And it's been a crazy story from where things were last year and all of the guys that they were in on to now, where they're still in on most of those guys, but you're kind of just waiting for something to happen there, because you've been in on these guys for a long time. And yes, there's been a coaching change that has perhaps delayed some things there, but it looks like the things are moving, at least moving in a positive direction, or at least moving in a direction at this point. The last guy I want to talk about is Justin Hill, who is a edge rusher from Winton Woods, place that Ohio State has gone to before, listed at 6'3", 220, 230. So would project as mainly like a 3-4 outside linebacker, or will have to get bigger to become a defensive end in a 4-3. And so he's been, he's got offers from everywhere. He's he's the number 72 player in the 24/7 composite. He's got offers from USC, Oregon, Alabama, all kinds of places, where I think a lot of these schools are running 3-4 defenses and preaching to him about the ability to rush the passer as an outside linebacker on the edge, get after the quarterback, that sort of thing. And then also showing Ohio State's defense, like, see, look, your defensive ends at Ohio State are 270 pounds and 265 pounds. And, not saying that you can't carry that weight, but can you imagine yourself, Justin, at 265 pounds? And so Ohio State has to look at him and say, well, we've got this jack role, and you're exactly perfect for it, because you're exactly what we're looking for when Jim Knowles thinks of this, as somebody who is in between a linebacker and defensive end. And that's what he's listed at. That's his size, that's his frame. And so it's like, yeah, we've got this perfect thing. You don't need to go play 3-4 outside linebacker. You can go play jack in our defense. Problem is, Tom, you've got to use it. You've got to showcase it. You've got to show it. You've got to have some proof of concept there, because you can talk about it. But until you've got something to show this year, you're just talking about it. And so this is one of the reasons, a lot of people like Devin Radcliffe, who does some X's and O's for Buckeye Huddle, like, really wants to see the jack again, because it can do some different things, and it can help the run defense and everything else. And yet another reason to do it is because you are using it as a sales pitch. And it's not just with Justin Hill. It's been used for the last few years. And I don't think it's working, because there's no there in terms of the jack. All you've got to show for it is Jack Sawyer in 2022. Is that right, Tom?
Mm-hmm.
Doing it a little bit, and it being relatively ineffective.
Yeah, and I think they didn't necessarily. Jack Sawyer, I think, was probably not the right fit for what that role is, because Jack Sawyer is not Justin Hill size. He's not Mitchell Melton size. He's not CJ Hicks size. That's the type of guy. It's kind of big linebacker type is what you're looking for there, and Jack Sawyer is much bigger than a big linebacker. So he was not necessarily a great fit there. But this is one where it feels like we've been talking about this. We've been talking about this for literally 2 years now. The jack was the big story of spring 2022. Think about spring 2022 and how long ago that feels like. We've been talking about this for a long time, and it really has never shown up on the field. And Part of that, I think, is that it was a little bit of an invention of necessity for Jim Knowles when he was at a place like Duke or Oklahoma State, where you can't just get a JT Tuimoloau and a Jack Sawyer and put them out on the field. You've got to kind of make do with what you got, and there's a little bit of duct tape and baling wire that goes into it. And it's like, well, we can come up with a creative solution to this problem. If you don't have the problem at Ohio State, you don't necessarily feel compelled to come up with a creative solution. Now, after next year, when you don't have JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer on the team anymore, maybe you need to get a little more creative. They have depth there, certainly, and you got Edric Houston in there as a true freshman who seems like he's going to be pretty darn good, and you've got Kenyatta Jackson and you got Caden Curry. So there's talent there, but maybe you get a little more creative, maybe you get a little more flexible. And this feels like a time when this is a season of all seasons. This is a season where you're going to be facing more teams potentially than you have in any season before, which means you're going to be potentially facing more styles of offense and more different types of offense than you have ever before. So you might need to be a little more flexible in terms of your defense to be able to have solutions to different kinds of problems, because you're not just going to be facing, the old school Iowa and Wisconsin offenses. We'll see what Iowa's offense is this year. I'm still going to assume it's going to trend Ferentz related or Ferentz adjacent. So you're going to have those teams, but who knows who you're facing in the college football playoff? You could be facing real spread them out 5 wide, Southern teams 3 weeks in a row in the college football playoff. You have no idea what you're facing, who you're facing. You're going to have to be able to adapt to whoever you're facing next on about 10 days notice multiple times during the playoff. So you're going to want to have, Jim Knowles talks about having tools in his toolbox. I think that's a big part of why he knows he needs all these different tools in his toolbox. You got to have those answers sitting there ready to pull off the shelf, because you can't just reinvent the wheel, in that 10-day, 12-day stretch between college football playoff games. You have to have those answers. So, if we see the Jack, I think that's part of the reason why. And if they're selling him on the Jack, then, that tells me that maybe they're really serious about doing it this time after we've heard about it and not actually seen it for a couple of years.
They're going to constantly be at a disadvantage recruiting guys like this who are 3-4 outside linebackers. And we saw it with Damon Wilson, Keon Keeley a couple of years ago. We saw it with Marquise Lightfoot, frankly. Guys that are listed as edge rushers, but are edge rushers in certain defenses and not edge rushers in other defenses, because in Ohio State, like I said, you've got to be a bigger defensive end, at least the way they do it now. Could you put a 235-pound defensive end out there? Probably. Will it work effectively? Can he stop the run? Are you facing the run? Does it, if you're facing the pass as much as teams are now, then maybe you can get away with it. But I do think you need to show it this year, and you've got the ability to do so, and you've got the defense behind you that you're confident in. So if you're going to talk about it, Tom, as I always say, be about it. And that's the bottom line. And any other wrestling lingo that I can think of. Nope, that's it. The last thing, Tom, is that the 2025 college football ballot has come out. College Football Hall of Fame ballot has come out. And there are three former Buckeyes, we could say. You've got Urban Meyer, former head coach, former graduate assistant at Ohio State, I believe, and Nick Saban, former Ohio State assistant defensive backs coach, and then, of course, 3-time All-American James Laurinaitis are all on the ballot. Urban and Saban should be locks. At the very least, Nick Saban is a lock to make it next year. James Laurinaitis, one of the rare 3-time All-Americans. I don't know if he'll make it this time. He should eventually make it. Like, Chris Spielman only made it in 2009 or so. So that was nearly 20 years after he played. So I think Laurinaitis will eventually be in, because he's also 2 major awards, won the Nagurski and won the Buckeyes, along with being 3-time All-American. But I'm wondering who the next Buckeye is, Tom, that will be in this. And the thing is, you have to be a first-team All-American by at least one of the 5 biblical All-American announced teams, which I think is not fair for quarterbacks, basically, because you can have with 5 different All-American teams announced. You can have somewhere like, 15 offensive linemen basically throughout all of this get announced as a first-team All-American. You're probably going to have 2 or 3 quarterbacks be named All-American every single year. And that leaves out guys like Justin Fields. That leaves out guys like C.J. Stroud. That leaves out guys like Dwayne Haskins, who were some of the all-time greatest Ohio State Buckeyes, but will never be in the College Football Hall of Fame. That leaves out Ezekiel Elliott, who won the Sullivan Award as the best amateur athlete in the nation, but was not a first-team All-American, so he will never be a College Football Hall of Famer. I just think I understand the need for rigidity, but that portion of it, I think, is unfair to certain positions and overly fair to other positions. Art Schlichter was a first-team All-American, can be a Hall of Famer. C.J. Stroud can't be.
I was waiting for you to say the name Tate Martell, and you didn't. So I'm a little thrown off my game right now. I was looking up on the College Football Hall of Fame website. There's always positions where, like, they're really underrepresented in halls of fame. So, like, for example, baseball. If you look at the Baseball Hall of Fame, there are way fewer third basemen than there probably should be. It's just very hard to make it to the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame as a third baseman. Tony, do you know how many place kickers are in the College Football Hall of Fame?
1?
No, 2. 2. And I will tell you, they are both former NFC North place kickers. One for the longtime kicker for the Chicago Bears, one a longtime kicker for the Detroit Lions. Would you like to guess who the 2 kickers in the College Football Hall of Fame are?
Kevin Butler and Jason Hanson?
Correct and correct. The reason I bothered to look that up is I was looking up multiple-time consensus Ohio State All-Americans who are not currently in the College Football Hall of Fame. Marvin Harrison Jr., Wyatt Davis, not eligible yet. Joey Bosa is probably someone who's you have to think about at some point. A.J. Hawk is someone who is a multiple-time All-American. You might see him maybe at some point. But, boy, when you think about kickers who really changed the game for teams that were playing in a lot of close games where, boy, they kicked a lot of field goals, it feels like you could have a Mike Nugent conversation here. And, I know the hashtag B1G thing would be for me to be lobbying for a punter, but when I look back at the Ohio State players who were, in terms of what their position is, were so far ahead, above and beyond everyone else at their position, it feels like Mike Nugent probably should get into the College Football Hall of Fame at some point. He was, a second-round draft pick? And I know it's by the Jets, which is basically like a UFL team. But still, that's that tells you how he was viewed coming out of college, in addition to the Groza Award, in addition to the multiple-time All-American. Like, if kickers are part of the game, and obviously they are because you have 2 of them in the Hall of Fame, it feels like Mike Nugent maybe should be the third one.
Well, let's not forget he was also the MVP of that 2004 Ohio State football team. So
he sure was.
If you are a kicker and the MVP of an Ohio State football team, albeit one coached by Jim Tressel, you would think, like, boy, that'd be, do not pass go, or do not collect your $200, go immediately to the College Football Hall of Fame, which I believe is the prize awarded for being inducted to the Hall of Fame. That's a good one. I think you'll eventually see a Joey Bosa in there. Nick Bosa getting hurt his junior year. That's a questionable one. But there's a lot of fantastic college football players that are never going to be in the College Football Hall of Fame because that year there may have been somebody that was more fantastic that was named an All-American instead of them. But, like, I was looking back at some of the past quarterbacks that were first-team All-Americans. I loved him. Joe Hamilton for Georgia Tech is eligible for the College Football Hall of Fame. Justin Fields is not. At least Troy Smith was a first-team All-American when he won the Heisman. But, I assume Brady Quinn was as well by at least somebody. He won the Walter Camp Award or something like that. So I assume he is eligible for that. But, like, imagine being the years playing behind or playing the same year as Tim Tebow. Like, I was pretty good. Like Jared Zabransky. Like, come on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how many punters do you think are in the College Football Hall of Fame?
I will say Todd Sauerbrunn.
Sadly, no. Should have
Oh.
been. If you don't remember Todd Sauerbrunn, punter for West Virginia in the 94-ish, early to mid 90s. I just remember him. I don't know how many 90-yard punts he had, but in my head, he had about 10 of them. I just remember punt after punt going 90, 80, 90 yards, just an absolute cannon. But no, two punters in the Hall of Fame, Tony. So there is one who is kind of, if I tell you, hey, a name synonymous with punting, and not someone who wore a watch. Who would you say?
Is the watch a clue for the other one?
No, it is not.
So we'll
Reggie
go
Roby
Ray.
Reggie Roby not in the College Football Hall of Fame, somewhat surprisingly, but
Ray Guy.
Go ahead. Ray Guy, yes. Now, I will guarantee you know this other player. You don't think of him as a punter.
It's not Tom Tupa.
It should not Tom Tupa.
That JK kid from Alabama in 2014.
Also not JK, what's his name? No.
Are we counting
JK
Vic
Scott.
Janowitz?
Not Vic Janowitz, no.
Okay, give it to me.
I'm gonna tell you which school he played at.
Okay. All right.
And this is really gonna narrow it down because there are not that many players who played for this school. And I'm gonna tell you again, it is not Tate Martell. This is a player who played his college football at UNLV.
Randall Cunningham.
Randall Cunningham, good old QB Eagles, is in there as he's listed as a punter. I don't know if I have to look and see if he's also listed as a quarterback, because he's listed as a quarterback on both of them. Or on his.
He had the greatest punt in NFL history. We know that.
He is. Yeah, he's not listed as. He's not listed with UNLV.
I think
as a quarterback. No, he's in as a punter. He's in as a punter. That is wild.
Wow. What did he average?
Let's see. He was a 1983 first-team All-American. He was. Boy, there's a lot of talk about his. Okay, so two position star broke 18 UNLV records, including career marks for passing yards, 8,020, touchdown passes, 59, and punting average, 45.6. So that's respectable. Yeah, I got to tell you, I don't think of Randall Cunningham as a punter, but there you go. College Football Hall of Fame punter, Randall Cunningham. Tony, you learn something new every day.
I did. That's a good one. Finished his career with 142 punts for 6,471 yards. Quick math on that one, Tom, equates to exactly what you said, 45.6 in my head per kick. So,
hang on. I'm looking where Kirk Ferentz was at that point of his career. I don't think he was like a grad assistant at. I don't think he was a grad assistant at UNLV back then, but no, looks like he was Iowa's offensive line coach at that point. Which boy, can you imagine what Randall Cunningham would have been as an Iowa Hawkeye?
Well, I mean, I think we got to see it with Torrey Taylor the last couple of years, but and also Todd Sauerbrunn, real quickly, I believe the second-round pick of the Bears back in the day when, you didn't need anything other than a punter back in the 90s in the NFL. So that's going to do it. Congratulations to all of the, we did not answer the question about who would be next necessarily, like who is going to be the next one. So we'll save it for the summer. How's that? Perfect. If you like this video, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. We would appreciate it if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not, you're listening elsewhere, 5-star rating and review would do just as well. So I want to invite you always to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Join up, become a member there, say hello to us, and of course, YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle as well. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.